All right, hi there. My name is Todd. I'm making a video today about my experience and hopefully quite a few things that will help somebody else who is going through their experience with hyperacusis or hyperacusis. I don't know exactly how you want to pronounce it. It seems like it could go either way, acoustics or percussion, hyperacusis. Either way, so what is hyperacusis? Uh, Hyperacusis is a overreaction, um, physically, neurologically, and acoustically. I guess it covers physically, but I feel like it kind of feels like three different things. An overreaction to an initial insult of what I believe most of the time after my reading is an overwhelming, very loud experience with sound, or maybe not so overwhelmingly loud, but a long exposure to some kind of louder sound. This overexposure and then the reaction that follows um, sets up a hyperreaction in your neurological system and in your physical system with the nerves and muscles in your ear drum and into your middle ear by the stapedius bone and stapedius muscle area. The input going into your brain, I believe, gets kind of reset so that you have a lowering of your threshold for what feels like normal sound, and then you build up a lot of anxiety around hearing loud sounds. So it leads to a chain reaction of events that I believe, after having my own experience and researching this, chain of events that we can interrupt and we can help with. But it really, really helps to sort of know the entire constellation of events that are going on. So, who am I to talk about this? Well, my background is I've been a nurse for 20 plus years, an RN, in many, many different situations, ranging from a float nurse in a major hospital throughout the entire hospital to gastroenterology to wound care. So I have a pretty wide range, and I'm used to looking at things medically and scientifically and assessing what's working and what's not. And so that's part number one. Part number two, I am a musician. I went to music school before I even went to nursing school, so I've been a musician my entire adult life. And I also have a part-time job these days in a car shop. So I've been exposed to a lot of loud noises. Musically, I'm a singer and drummer. I should say drummer, singer. I went to school for percussion and drumming. And I grew up on a farm. And so this sets the stage for obvious long-term ear hearing problems. I have always been careful about protecting my hearing as an adult, always wearing earplugs, in-ear monitors, but pretty obvious that if you go long enough, you are going to have some issues. My first issues started when I was very young, probably 8 or 9 years old. It was the first time that I became aware I had tinnitus. I can remember the day it happened. So in kind of maybe a lucky way, I've had tinnitus long enough that the tinnitus doesn't really bother me that much. I have had significant exposures from different things. A motorcycle trip that I took left me with a sort of, I believe they call it a temporal shift, a tympanic shift of hearing, where my hearing was dulled for several days and was very scary. So the reason I'm telling you all this is this isn't the first time I've thought about these things, and it isn't the first my first trip down some of these roads, but the recent events are different than my past. I was working at the car shop. I had to cut a bolt off of a hardened bolt off of a piece of suspension. I used air tools. I did have shooter's muffs, ear muffs on, so I did use ear protection. But these tools are extremely loud. I haven't measured what they are, sound production wise, SPL wise, but or decibel wise, but they are extremely loud and very high pitched. A couple days after my incident, somebody else was using one in the shop, and I was paying attention to how loud it was, and I was quite far away. It still sounded very loud. So these are really loud. I probably had an exposure for around 40 minutes on and off. So after my exposure, I experienced what people experienced with hyperacusis, a real harsh sounding environment after that I was exquisitely sensitive to, and a kind of digital, tinny, robotic sound at certain frequencies, right around where you would whistle a tune, right in there. And I still have some of it. The reason I'm making the video is I've done a lot of research, and I think sometimes because of my nursing field, I will be able to look and know to look beyond what is available on the basic internet or on a basic web search into some of the more educational areas and research-based areas. And I found a lot of really good information after I really had a very dark period, and that's why I'm making this video. I reached a period where I was literally suicidal after about 6 weeks of dealing with this. I was wearing hearing protection all the time, everywhere, in my car, sometimes in the place I live, when I was out walking around and just doing things outside. I thought I was doing the right thing, and it turns out, I believe now, that I was doing kind of exactly the wrong thing. And this is the paradoxical problem with hyperacusis. So let me jump into that. So our initial wanting to make ourselves more comfortable and our anxiety around the loud noises makes us overuse hearing protection. Overusing hearing protection lowers our own threshold for being comfortable within the sound that we're hearing. Now, it's really important logically for you to become comfortable and understand exactly what I'm talking about, that we are not talking about using hearing protection for going out to to see a band, where the sound levels may be beyond what you would want to be exposed to for a certain period of time. I'm talking about our response to hyperacusis, and when we get this initial shock, is we're using hearing protection all of the time. And what happens is, just like if you would cover your eyes all day and then walk outside into the sun, the shock would be impressive, and you would feel like normal sunlight is going to cause harm. It would feel intrusive, it would feel painful. This is what we're doing to ourselves by overusing hearing protection. So let's back this up and run down sort of where I'm coming from, we have to start. It's really easy with the hearing stuff to get caught up in this sort of idea that we just have no ability to change what's going on, or what's going on is completely outside of our control, and our body is not acting in a normal way that we would want or need or expect, so that we could do something to help it. I don't believe this is the case. It's just we have to truly understand and realign the way we're thinking about it. So let's rethink about it. Let's keep people from going to this really, really dark place that I found myself in. So let's put it in terms that we all sort of feel more comfortable with. I had an initial insult to my hearing. You had an initial insult to your hearing in some way, shape, or form. Though that insult, that assault, is really, let's start comparing this to any inflammatory event that we have, or any accidental inflammatory event, right? So I'm going to take the example. Sorry, I have some paint on my finger. I was painting something. To being hit in the face in the area of our mouth or ear. If we were hit, right, if somebody punched us, we, in some way, because we have all experienced being hurt in the past, broken arm, broken leg, burns to our hands, whatever, we fall on the ground and hit our hands, hit our head, whatever. We're more comfortable with understanding these things. So we would expect, if we were hit on the side of the face, we would expect inflammation, pain. Maybe we actually do some internal damage. Maybe we have a nerve, some nerve damage. We don't feel things quite right. If it was even in the area of the ear, we would even expect our hearing to be affected, right? We would, if we had some strangeness in our hearing, we would think that this was all expected. We would protect that. We would protect it while it was healing, and in some cases overprotect it. Right? We would be like, flinch at things, or chewing, or whatever, in the ways that we would do it, and we would psychologically, even though we would of course be in some distress about this, we would understand it because it falls within the normal areas that we have dealt with our whole lives. What I believe we get into the habit of, because we can't stop our hearing from coming in, right? We don't get to choose what we hear and what we don't. We are always being inundated with this 24/7, or as much as we are up. And this input, when we are not hearing it correctly, causes us to, of course, focus on that input. And then we get into a story loop in our brain where we become very anxiety ridden. The anxiety leads us to do anything to feel comfortable, more comfortable with what's going on. So we use earplugs, earmuffs, anything that we can do, or I should say, and we start to self-isolate. So we're sitting in our rooms, or we're sitting in our house. We don't want to go out into this environment. So what happens? So I went to see an ENT and an audiologist. They tested my hearing. It had the usual drop off in the ranges I would expect from being a musician and being at the age I'm at. And but when I mentioned the pain I was having, actual pain that I was having, that felt like it was kind of running down my neck. It felt like it was in my ear canal. It felt like it was hot, irritated. It felt, and I still kind of have some of this, it felt like I had sort of a sinus issue going on, like as if I had a cold. The fullness that I had in hearing, and that sound that I described earlier, the fullness was really distressing to me. I couldn't quite figure it out. So it took me a long time because of this anxiety and this overwhelming feeling of thinking, well, there's nothing I can do, and I'm in a place I'm never going to get out of. It took me a long time to back up and start going back to the same things I would apply to any other injury. We would expect if you got punched in the face, there would be an initial shock, an initial bunch of inflammation. We would expect that to take some time to relax. We would expect that we would have all kinds of degrees of things going on here. We would then start to expose ourselves to more use, right? As time would go on, just like any injury, we would start to chew on that side again. We would start to move our head in the normal ways. And we may experience it once we started to do that. We've all experienced this with tooth issues. You get a tooth work done, and then you start to chew on that side again, and then the next day you're like, "Whoa, I kind of overdid it." So we would expect an up and down average to sort of happen, and then over time that average would get better and better. I believe our response to hyperacusis is that we, because of our anxiety, start to upend this normal problem, and we actually make it worse. So, as I said, my issue was really, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes here to make sure that I cover things. So, as I said, I felt like I had reduced tolerance, I had pressure, I had a muffled sort of sound. So I started looking into this, and I found a lot of these sort of educational, research-oriented, or not, I shouldn't say a lot. I didn't find a lot. I found several research-oriented speeches given by people who study these things, and that started to click then. And all of a sudden, I started to feel like I had a little bit of control and understanding. I started hearing words that I had no idea existed, like tempor tympani muscle, and and I might pronounce some of these things wrong. Patelois eustachian tube dysfunction. Patelois or Patelis eustachian tube dysfunction. Tympanic flutter. And again, the one I mentioned before, tempor tympani muscle tightening. So all of a sudden, these things started to make sense. The physical part started to make sense. I sort of understood that the brain could get into this mode of misunderstanding things, right? The brain can do this with all kinds of issues, and the misunderstanding can lead to our own discomfort. It's almost a PTSD type thing, right? We're over responding to responses after the initial event that aren't going to harm us in a way that makes us feel we are going to be harmed. So, with things like understanding and hearing that there are these muscles and contraction sort of areas and nerves that are all running right in the area of our eardrum, down by our neck. The trigeminal nerve runs all through here, so all kinds of nerves. But this eustachian tube dysfunction of the eustachian tube spasming and not wanting to let off, the tympani muscle, that is another muscle that acts as it tightens when we have a swallow, when we have a startle response, when we are in anticipation of loud sounds. This is one of the things I felt like I was experiencing, because I was thinking to myself, why am I hoarse? Why am I swallowing and feeling pain? Why does the back of my tongue kind of hurt? And it didn't make sense to me until I started reading this, and then it started to fill in the gaps. That, well, if these things are spasming, just like if we got punched, we would feel spasms. If it wasn't our hearing, we wouldn't apply the same things that we're applying to it, right? We would think, well, of course it's spasming. It's reacting to this initial event. It's relaxing and then kind of going vacillating back and forth between reaction and non-reaction based on what we're doing, our movements, or all kinds of things that are going on. So I started to feel like, okay, this is giving me a handle on how I can start to understand this. So that's the pain side of it. So we're going to put that aside for a second, and we're going to move on to the anxiety part of it and the over response of being careful. This is the place that can really, I believe, take people, and I've seen their talks on the internet, and I feel really bad for them because I understand completely how it can go this way. And I'm going to put out a sort of a plea that I really believe, and I have experienced it now, that the overprotection is just a enormous mistake. Because what we're doing is we're taking, after this event has happened, we're taking our response, our anxiety response, putting in earplugs all the time. And again, I've already talked about this, but really think this through. We keep lowering the threshold where we are comfortable because we are closing off our hearing. So if we're closing off our hearing internally, it's quiet, 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 quiet. We take it out now. Normal things, doing that. Whatever's going on, a truck driving by, an ambulance going by. These are normal events that are not going to harm your hearing. This is really important to logically impress into your internal experience with this. We are overprotecting ourselves from things that are not going to harm our hearing. What we are doing is we're trying to make our anxiety better and make our comfort level better. But what we are actually doing is setting ourselves up for a really long-term problem. And that long-term problem is the more we lower our threshold, the more anxiety we will have, the more we will protect our hearing, and the more we will lower our threshold. So once I saw some of these academic speeches online from researchers, and then I found a wonderful, really highly descriptive website, hyperacususfocus.org, hyperacususfocus.org. And it ran through all of these things and all of these muscles, and it gave wonderful descriptions. So please go to that website and read. Once I read through all of these things and started to realize, wow, I'm doing this thing to myself. I'm making this worse. And really important question to ask yourself if you're hesitant about where I'm going. Now, I spent 6 weeks doing this, protecting my hearing everywhere. Ask yourself, is it making it better? It's a really bottom level, rubber meets the road question. Is it making it better? I will bet your answer is going to be no. So, how do we make it better? And we have to do things to make it better. So, the first thing I did was take my earplugs out and stop protecting my hearing. I went out on the first night to dinner with a friend, and then subsequently, a little later on, stopped at a bar to meet another friend. Both of these things were loud. It was the hardest thing I've ever done to not have an earplug, at least in one ear, or to even stay in these environments. I had to keep telling myself, there is nothing out of the ordinary here. Yes, it's loud, but it's not rock concert loud. It's not overwhelming loud. It's just people noise loud. The following day, the next day after this, my pain had kind of increased in the morning because it had gotten a real big workout, right? Just like if we started using, you know, our jaw after we had gotten hit here, the next day we would probably expect, oh, it's going to hurt quite a bit. But the 2 days afterwards, I woke up and I thought, oh, it's actually a little bit better. Now, why does this happen? Again, it really helps to understand the whole process. Well, the first day we would expect it got all these muscles that we've been overprotecting and keeping our hearing quiet. Wow, they got blasted, right? Still normal hearing, normal sound levels, but they really got worked out. So the next day they were really feeling it. But the following day after that, the normal room sounds, normal outdoor sounds, normal things I was doing, they weren't reacting quite as much to it. There wasn't this timpani muscle spasming. There wasn't the paddle eustachian tube tightening. I didn't know any of these could be doing this because, and we kind of feel some of them, right? We can feel pressure changes and we pop our ears. But I wasn't feeling quite as bad. Within 4 days, my world had changed. I did not wear earplugs for those days, didn't wear my noise canceling headphones, and all of a sudden it was starting to relax. Now, I'm a week and a half past that point. I'm still having a little bit of pain, but I would say I'm at about 85%. I still have some of the feeling of fullness when I'm in certain situations. I still have that frequency sound that's annoying and kind of, frankly, hard to deal with. That's still in and out. But slowly, these things are getting better. This is really important from before. Was what I was doing making things better when I was overprotecting? The answer is no, it was not. Is what I'm doing now making things progressively better? Yes. How much better it will get, I don't know. But let's face it, the comparison of wearing earplugs all day long and lowering this threshold level, becoming a recluse and becoming a shut-in, and trying to wrap yourself with a blanket so you don't have to hear the world, that is an option we don't want to take. I understand it, I care about it, but it's an option I want to stop you from doing. So, other things that I have done along the way that I believe are part of this. Now, I took ibuprofen as an anti-inflammatory early on, but and I believe it helped a little bit, but that will eventually. It's really hard on your stomach. It's really easy to get into a habit of overusing that. Other things that I researched that we want to increase. So we want to increase our threshold of hearing. That will in turn lessen our anxiety. Increase in threshold, lessen our anxiety because we get more used to it, just like we get used to anything we do that is stressful. The more we do it, the more we allow it to happen, the less we focus directly on it, the less we get stressed about it. So increase the incoming sound levels without protection. Decrease our anxiety. We want to increase blood flow to the inner ear. There are studies out there, I'll let you look them up yourself. There was, I believe, an Israeli study that found that A, C, E, and magnesium really help with the free radicals after an initial sound exposure and up to 3 days after that. So A, C, E, and magnesium. And I believe just increasing those may be a very good idea for people who are prone to these. It just might help with more blood flow equals more oxygen equals more healing. That applies to anywhere in the body. We want increased blood flow so that more oxygen can get there, so that the process of dealing with inflammation can happen quicker and our body recovers faster. I've read the B vitamins, B6, B12, and folate B6, B12, and folate can also help. Nerve conduction, also with some opening up of small vessels. That's right. Think these vessels in our inner ear are extremely small. We want to increase blood flow to them for everything that I just said. Zinc plays a part. I want to put out a little my own personal warning about things. Ginkgo biloba has also shown to increase blood flow, but please be very careful and don't overuse any of the doses of these things. The vitamins A and E are fat-soluble vitamins. That means they get stored in your fat so they can build up in your system. We don't want to overuse. We want to just make sure we're getting enough. So take the recommended dose. We don't have to overuse them. We're just trying to make sure that everything can be working to its full extent. Ginkgo biloba, I know of people who have had intracranial bleeds because they've taken too much of it. When I take it, I actually have had blood vessels in my eyes break. So I'm very susceptible to it, so I don't use that anymore. Just looking over my notes. So again, we want to put these into put this whole scope into an understanding that makes sense to us, because then we have some control. The control will allow us to know we're doing the right thing, lessen our anxiety, and allow us to continue doing the right thing. And in this case, the right thing is less overprotection of the ear, increase blood flow, increase hydration, make sure you're hydrated. We want to get exercise. Exercise dramatically increases blood flow to these areas. Exercise can also, in this, really help us with the anxiety part of it, because it gets us moving, it gets us focused on something else, it increases the blood flow, gets our heart pumping. This is all part of the healing process. Lastly, I'm going to tell you a story that I had a similar issue in how I felt. I had a tooth problem, that I had an abscess that they were not able to get to, and it was going on for days. They were doing a root canal. It wasn't relieving it. The dentists weren't quite sure what was going on. Finally, they opened up my below my tooth by my jaw, and they found the abscess, and that was wonderful. But along the way, they severely bruised the nerve. I lost all feeling in this area of my face. It was a similar thing to this. I went down this very dark place where no matter what, I couldn't stop feeling this. I was like, okay, you're always doing this. You're like, it was making me insane. Finally, I just kept doing, I went back to a sort of normal kind of living and just got on with it. And I wasn't aware of the healing going on. And sorry, I don't know if this just popped into my screen. I wasn't aware of the healing going on, right? I was doing all the right things, trying to decrease my anxiety with this too. It was making me nuts. And I ended up really in a dark place like this. And then one day I woke up, after doing all these things, and it was just a little better. And I knew I'd gotten somewhere. And that's what we're looking for here, right? Looking for you to just maybe go against what it feels like you should be doing, because it feels like you should be protecting your hearing in sort of a simple logical sense. Go against that. Allow the regular world sounds to come in. Relax. Breathe. And allow for the day when you can get up and say, okay, I think it's a little better. The day you can say that, you're on the right track. And as I said, I will bet, doing what you've been doing, you might be a little more comfortable as far as it's more comfortable, but it's more comfortable if we break our leg to never move our leg, right? It's not right. We want to get back to our way of living. That's what I'm comparing this to. So I hope I've given you a way to understand this, a way to proceed. Again, the website is hyperacususfocus.org, hyperacususfocus.org. And really read through this. It talks about the muscles, it talks about everything. It gives you an understanding that we can think of this in the same way as another kind of injury, like I said, the punch to the jaw, and it gives us a little bit of understanding, or a lot of understanding, where maybe we had very little. I hope this helps, and I hope you get better, and I hope all of this resonates and makes sense. I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much.